Stop making a scene." "It's already done." Those were the words that shattered my world. My son Kevin stood in my Denver kitchen like he owned the place, arms crossed, completely indifferent to the devastation he'd just unleashed. I needed that money for my planned trip to Europe. I stared at him, my hands still damp from washing the morning dishes, Harold's favorite coffee mug trembling in my grip. "You sold your father's vintage Omega without asking me first." "Mom, seriously, let it go. It's just a timepiece, just a timepiece." 8 months after burying my husband of 41 years, and my own son had stolen the only thing of Harold's I wore daily, wound every morning like Harold had taught me, feeling connected to him through that simple ritual. The thing about betrayal is that it has a distinct taste, bitter, metallic, like copper pennies on your tongue. Standing there in my Denver kitchen, staring at my 44-year-old son, who apparently thought grief had an expiration date, I tasted it fully for the first time. "Which shop?" I asked quietly. Kevin's wife, Miranda, looked up from her phone. "Oh, good." "She's being sensible now." Her voice dripped with that particular condescension she'd perfected over the years. "Honestly, Margaret, clinging to material possessions isn't healthy. Harold wouldn't want you living in the past." Don't tell me what Harold would want, I thought, but bit my tongue. Miranda had been telling me what Harold would want since the funeral, usually whenever it involved me giving them something. "Rocky Mountain Pawn on Colfax," Kevin said, checking his smartwatch. An expensive Apple device that probably cost more than Harold's Omega was worth. They gave me $1,200. Not bad for something that old. $1,200 for a 1974 Omega Speedmaster that Harold had saved 4 months of overtime to buy when Kevin was born. The watch Harold wore every single day of our marriage, except the day he died, when the hospital handed it to me in a plastic bag with his wedding ring. "That watch was worth at least $4,000, I said. Miranda snorted. "In what universe?" It wasn't even keeping time properly, because I was the one winding it, keeping it alive, keeping Harold alive in some small way. But they wouldn't understand that. Kevin and Miranda lived in a world where everything had a price tag and nothing held memories. "I'm going to get it back," I announced. "Good luck with that," Kevin said, heading for the door. "We fly out tomorrow morning. Miranda's been planning this European trip for months." Miranda followed him, pausing at the door with that fake sympathetic expression she wore whenever she wanted to seem caring. "Margaret, you really should consider counseling. This obsession with Harold's belongings isn't normal." The door slammed, leaving me alone with the bitter taste of betrayal and the silence that had become my constant companion since Harold died. But here's what Kevin and Miranda didn't know about their supposedly helpless old mother. I'd spent 38 years as a credit union manager. I knew the difference between giving up and strategic planning, and I was done giving up. The pawn shop was exactly what I'd expected, cramped, dusty, with the kind of fluorescent lighting that made everything look sickly. The man behind the counter had sleeves of tattoos and the weary expression of someone who'd heard every sob story imaginable. "You hear about the Omega?" he asked before I even opened my mouth. "How did you know?" "Your son warned me you might show up, said you were having trouble letting go." He shrugged apologetically. "Look, lady, I sympathize, but business is business. I paid fair market value. Fair market value. As if there was a standard price for 41 years of marriage, for the sound of Harold winding that watch every morning while his coffee brewed, for the weight of it in my hands when the hospital nurse placed it there alongside his wedding ring. I'll buy it back. Whatever you need." The man, his name tag read Carlos, looked uncomfortable. "It's already sold." Guy came in this morning, paid cash. No returns in this business. My heart sank. Some stranger was walking around Denver wearing Harold's watch, and I'd never see it again because my son needed spending money for his European vacation. But here's the thing, Carlos continued, lowering his voice. We found something unusual when we were cleaning it up for sale. He disappeared into a back room and returned with a small manila envelope. There was a hidden compartment in the back. Real professional work had to have been done by a jeweler. Found this inside. Inside the envelope was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. In Harold's careful handwriting, Margaret's birthday, June 12th, 1957, the day I knew I'd marry her. Below that, a series of numbers and letters that looked like some kind of code. NS3362D0612MS. I stared at the paper, my hands shaking. Harold had never mentioned any hidden compartment. In 41 years of marriage, he'd kept this secret, hidden in plain sight on his wrist. You recognize those numbers? Carlos asked. I shook my head, but something about them nagged at me. They looked familiar, like a password or account number. Harold had been meticulous about record keeping, always writing down important numbers in his careful handwriting. The guy who bought the watch, I said suddenly. What did he look like? Carlos's expression shifted, became more guarded. Why? Because my husband hid this for a reason, and I think whoever bought that watch might be in for a surprise. Ma'am, I really can't. Please. I leaned forward, letting Carlos see the grief that was still raw after 8 months. That watch is all I have left of him. I'm not asking you to break any laws. I just want to know if the buyers seem to know about the compartment. Carlos was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. Finally, he sighed. He didn't say much, but when I mentioned we'd found something inside, he got real interested. Asked if we'd opened it. A chill ran down my spine. Did he give you a name? Paid cash. No paperwork required for purchases. Carlos paused, but he did ask specifically about watches that had come in recently. Said he collected vintage Omegas. Someone had been looking for Harold's watch specifically. But why? And how did they know about the hidden compartment? I thanked Carlos and walked back to my car, the piece of paper burning in my purse like a secret I wasn't sure I wanted to uncover. Harold had hidden this for 47 years. Hidden it from me. What else had my husband been hiding? That night, I sat at Harold's desk in our bedroom, surrounded by 41 years of financial records. Harold had kept everything. Bank statements, tax returns, investment account statements, all filed away in his precise, methodical manner. The code from the watch stared up at me from the piece of paper. NS3362DV0612MS. I'd been through every account we owned, every investment, every safety deposit box. Nothing matched those numbers. Harold had been financially conservative. Savings account, checking account, a modest 401k, nothing fancy, nothing hidden, or so I'd thought. My phone rang, interrupting my search. Kevin's name flashed on the screen. Mom, Miranda's upset. She says you made a scene at the pawn shop. I almost laughed. In what world was trying to recover my husband's stolen watch making a scene? I went to buy back your father's watch. Unfortunately, someone else already purchased it. See? Problem solved. Time to move on. The casualness in his voice made my chest tighten with anger. This was Harold's son, the baby Harold had worked double shifts to provide for, the kid Harold taught to throw a football and change a tire. When had Kevin become this cold? Kevin, there was something hidden inside the watch. Your father left me a message. Silence on the other end. Then, what kind of message? I'm not sure yet, but it looks like account numbers or a password. Mom. Kevin's voice changed, became more alert. What exactly did the message say? Something in his tone made me hesitate. This was the most interested Kevin had sounded in anything related to his father since the funeral. Just some numbers, I said vaguely. Probably nothing important. Maybe I should come over, help you figure it out. Now I did laugh, bitter and sharp. Yesterday you told me to stop living in the past. Today you want to help sort through Harold's things? I'm just trying to be supportive by stealing his watch. Kevin sighed heavily. Fine, be stubborn. But don't come crying to me when you drive yourself crazy chasing shadows. After he hung up, I stared at the phone. Kevin's sudden interest was suspicious, but I couldn't figure out why. He'd made it clear he considered Harold's possessions worthless sentimentality, unless they weren't just sentiment. I returned to the desk, but this time I approached it differently. Instead of looking for accounts that matched the numbers, I started looking for patterns. Harold had been an accountant before retirement. He thought in systems, in logical progressions. NS could be national security. Harold had worked for a defense contractor early in his career. The 3,362 made me pause. Harold's social security number started with 336, but not 3362. DV could be Denver, where we'd lived our entire marriage. 0612 made me pause. June 12th, our wedding anniversary. MS was harder. Harold's initials were HM. Mine were MS. Margaret Stevens, my maiden name. The code included my maiden name initials. I pulled out my laptop and started searching. Swiss bank accounts used codes like this. So did offshore investment firms. 3 hours later, I found it. Nexus Securities Investment Management, based in the Cayman Islands. Their website was discreet, professional, catering to high-net-worth individuals seeking privacy and security. The account login page required a client number and password. With trembling fingers, I typed NNS3362 in the client number field. Valid account number appeared on the screen. Now I needed the password, something only I would know, something Harold knew I would figure out. I tried our wedding date, our address, my birthday. Nothing. Then I remembered the note. Margaret's birthday, June 12th, 1957, the day I knew I'd marry her. Not my actual birthday. June 12th was the day we met. At a summer festival in Washington Park, Harold always said he knew that night he'd marry me someday. I typed in 061257 and held my breath. Access granted. The screen that loaded next made me gasp. Current account balance, $3,247,891.67. Harold had hidden nearly $3.25 million from me for our entire marriage. I stared at the screen until the numbers burned themselves into my retinas. $3.2 million in an account I'd never known existed, in a bank I'd never heard of, hidden by a husband who'd spent 41 years convincing me we were living paycheck to paycheck. Every argument we'd had about money, every time I'd clipped coupons or bought generic groceries or mended Harold's work shirts instead of buying new ones, all of it while he had millions sitting in an offshore account. My first instinct was anger. Pure white-hot rage at the deception, at the lies by omission, at 41 years of wondering if we'd have enough for retirement while Harold secretly stashed away a fortune. But then I clicked on the account history. The first deposit was made in 1983, 4 years after Kevin was born, $8,000. The notation read, Initial Inheritance Investment, HM Inheritance Fund. Harold had never mentioned any inheritance. I scrolled through years of deposits, all relatively small, $500 here, $1,000 there, regular contributions that explained why Harold had been so careful with our household budget. He hadn't been hiding money from our income. He'd been systematically building something separate. The deposits continued steadily until 2009, then jumped dramatically. Instead of hundreds of dollars, Harold had been depositing $15,000 and $25,000 at a time. The notation on those larger deposits made my blood run cold. Real estate liquidation, Denver properties. Harold had been buying and selling real estate without my knowledge. Properties I'd never seen, investments I'd never been consulted about, business dealings that had apparently made him wealthy. How do you live with someone for 41 years and not know they're conducting secret business transactions? I clicked on the account messages and found a folder labeled For Margaret, Emergency Access Only. Inside was a video file uploaded just 2 months before Harold died. I hesitated before clicking play. Whatever Harold had to say about this secret fortune, I wasn't sure I was ready to hear it. But I was alone in our bedroom. At midnight, my son had stolen the only clue to this mystery, and I was apparently wealthy beyond my wildest dreams. Ready or not, I needed answers. Harold's face filled the screen, looking older and more tired than I remembered. He was sitting in his home office, probably having recorded this on a weekend morning. "Margaret, if you're watching this, I'm gone, and something's gone wrong." His voice was steady, but his eyes looked sad. "I hoped you'd never need to access this account, that we'd grow old together, and I'd eventually tell you about it over dinner someday." He paused, rubbing his face with the same gesture he'd used whenever he was working through a difficult problem. "The money isn't mine, sweetheart. It was my father's, hidden away before he died in 1982. He made me promise to keep it secret, to protect it, to only use it if our family was ever in real danger." Harold's father had died when Kevin was 3. I remembered Harold being devastated, remembered the modest inheritance that had helped us buy our first house. Apparently, there had been much more to it. My father saw what the Great Depression did to families, how quickly stability could disappear. He wanted to make sure his grandchildren would always be protected, no matter what happened. Harold looked directly into the camera, and I felt like he was sitting right next to me. "I've been investing the money carefully, conservatively. Every penny is documented. Every transaction is legal. It's grown because I've been reinvesting for 40 years, but the original amount was meant to be emergency money, insurance against catastrophe." The video continued with Harold explaining the account details, the investment strategy, the legal protections he'd put in place, but I was stuck on one phrase: "I hoped you'd never need to access this account." Harold had died of a stroke at his office. Sudden, unexpected, no warning signs. How could he have known I'd need this money? Unless the catastrophe he'd been protecting against wasn't random. Unless Harold had known something about our family that I was just beginning to understand. The next morning, I called in sick to my part-time job at the local library. For the first time in 8 months, I had something more important to do than reshelving books and helping patrons with computer problems. I needed to understand what Harold had meant by real danger. The investment account had detailed records going back 40 years, but I started with the recent transactions. Harold's last deposit had been made just 3 weeks before he died. $35,000 with the notation, "Property sale, emergency liquidation." Emergency liquidation. Harold had been converting assets to cash right before his death. I spent the morning researching every property transaction Harold had made. The man I'd been married to for 41 years had apparently been a secret real estate investor, buying and selling properties all over Denver with money I didn't know we had. But here's what made my blood run cold. Every property Harold had sold in the last year had been purchased by the same buyer, a company called Stevens Investments, LLC. Stevens was Kevin's middle name, Kevin Stevens Williams. I grabbed my phone and called my nephew David, who worked in real estate. If anyone would know about property transactions in Denver, it would be David. "Aunt Margaret, how are you holding up?" "I'm fine, honey." "Listen, I need to ask you about something. Have you ever heard of a company called Stevens Investments, LLC? David was quiet for a moment. "Actually, yeah, they've been pretty active lately, buying up properties in good neighborhoods. Cash deals, moving fast. Why? Do you know who owns the company?" "I can find out. Give me an hour." I spent that hour going through Harold's desk more carefully, looking for any documentation about his real estate dealings. Hidden in the back of his filing cabinet behind 40 years of tax returns, I found a folder marked Insurance Policies. But instead of insurance documents, the folder contained contracts, property deeds, and correspondence related to Harold's investments. At the bottom of the pile was a letter that made my hands shake. It was from a private investigator dated 8 months before Harold's death. "Mr. Williams, per your request, I've completed the investigation into your son Kevin Stevens Williams' financial activities. My findings are concerning. Your son has accumulated approximately $220,000 in gambling debts to several online betting sites. He's also taken out multiple high-interest loans against his business using fraudulent information about his income and assets. Of greater concern are the inquiries, Mr. Williams has been making about your estate. He's contacted 4 different attorneys asking about inheritance law and the process for contesting wills. He's also made inquiries about power of attorney procedures and assisted living facilities. I believe your son is planning to have you declared incompetent in order to gain control of your assets. The paperwork I've uncovered suggests he's been researching this option for several months. I recommend taking immediate steps to protect your assets and ensure your wife's financial security. Regards, Patricia Chen, private investigator. My phone rang. David. Aunt Margaret, you're not going to believe this. Stevens Investments, LLC is owned by Kevin Williams. You're Kevin. I closed my eyes, the pieces finally falling into place. Harold hadn't been hiding money from me. He'd been hiding it from Kevin. Every property sale, every cash deposit, every emergency liquidation had been Harold systematically moving assets out of Kevin's reach. Harold had known his own son was planning to rob us, but Harold had died before he could warn me, leaving only the hidden compartment in his watch as a clue to find the truth. My son hadn't stolen Harold's Omega for vacation money. He'd stolen it because he was looking for exactly what I'd found: access to Harold's hidden fortune. And now that Kevin knew I'd found something in the watch, he wouldn't stop until he figured out what it was. I was still sitting in Harold's chair, staring at the private investigator's report, when I heard Miranda's key in my front door. She'd had a spare key since the funeral, ostensibly to check on me when Kevin was working. Now I understood she'd been checking on Harold's assets. "Margaret, are you home?" Miranda's voice echoed through the house, artificially sweet. Kevin and I stopped by before heading to the airport. I quickly shoved the investigator's report back into the folder and minimized the offshore account on my laptop screen. Whatever game Kevin and Miranda were playing, I needed to understand the rules before I revealed my hand. "In the bedroom," I called back. They appeared in the doorway moments later, Kevin carrying a small suitcase and Miranda wearing the kind of outfit that screamed expensive vacation. Her designer sunglasses probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Just wanted to say goodbye," Kevin said, but his eyes were scanning Harold's desk, taking inventory of the papers spread around me. "What are you working on?" "Sorting through your father's things," I said carefully. "There's so much I never knew about." Miranda stepped closer, her gaze focused on my laptop screen. "Find anything interesting?" The question sounded casual, but I caught the sharp attention in her voice. These weren't courtesy visits, they were reconnaissance missions. "Just old bank statements and tax records. Your father was very thorough with his paperwork." Kevin relaxed slightly. "Yeah, Dad was obsessive about record keeping. Probably kept every receipt from the last 20 years. "Actually," I said, deciding to test their reaction, "I did find something odd. Your father had some kind of investment account I didn't know about. Nothing major, just a few thousand." The change in both their expressions was immediate and unmistakable. Kevin stepped forward, trying to appear casual but failing completely. "An investment account? What kind?" "I'm not sure yet. The paperwork is confusing. I might need to hire an accountant to help me figure it out." Miranda exchanged a quick glance with Kevin. "We could help you with that. Kevin's good with financial documents. I bet he is," I thought, remembering the private investigator's report about Kevin's gambling debts and fraudulent loan applications. "That's very kind, but I already made an appointment with Harold's old accounting firm. They'll know how to handle his investments properly." Kevin's jaw tightened. "Mom, those guys charge $400 an hour. I can look at the paperwork for free. I can afford $400 an hour, Kevin." The silence that followed was loaded with tension. Miranda's mask of concern was slipping, revealing the calculating woman underneath. Kevin was practically vibrating with frustrated energy. "We should probably get going," Miranda said finally. "Don't want to miss our flight." But Kevin didn't move. "Mom, about the message you found in Dad's watch. Maybe I should take a look at those numbers before we leave, just to make sure they're not something important." "What numbers?" Miranda asked sharply. Kevin shot her a warning look. "Mom found some kind of code in the watch. Probably nothing, but you never know." Now Miranda was fully alert, her vacation excitement replaced by laser focus. "What kind of code?" I stood up slowly, using my full height to look down at my daughter-in-law. "The kind that's none of your business." Miranda's face flushed red. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." My husband left me a private message, private being the operative word. "Mom," Kevin stepped between us, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. "We're family. There's no need for secrets." "Secrets?" I almost laughed at the irony. Like the secret gambling debts? Or the secret company you've been using to buy properties with money you don't have? The color drained from Kevin's face. Miranda's mouth fell open. "I don't know what you're talking about," Kevin said, but his voice was shaky now. "Stevens Investments LLC ring a bell?" I watched both their faces go pale. "Your father knew, Kevin. He knew everything." Miranda recovered first, her voice turning vicious. "You crazy old woman, you don't know anything. I know your husband owes $220,000 to online gambling sites. I know he's been researching how to have me declared incompetent, and I know he's been planning this for months." Kevin slumped against the doorframe like his strings had been cut. The fight went out of him completely. "How?" he whispered. "Your father hired a private investigator. Every lie, every debt, every plan you made to steal from us, it's all documented." I walked to the desk and pulled out the investigator's report, watching Kevin's face as he recognized the letterhead. "Harold protected me from you, even after his death. That code you're so interested in, it's the key to more money than you've ever dreamed of. Money that will never, ever belong to you." Miranda grabbed Kevin's arm. "We need to leave. Now." But Kevin was staring at me with something that looked like respect for the first time in years. He really knew. He knew his son was planning to rob his own mother. "What kind of man does that make you, Kevin?" For just a moment, Kevin looked like the little boy I'd raised, confused and ashamed. Then Miranda's grip on his arm tightened, and the moment passed. "This isn't over," Miranda hissed as they headed for the door. "Yes, it is," I called after them. "It's been over since the day you decided I was worth more to you dead than alive." The front door slammed, leaving me alone with my husband's secrets and the knowledge that the real fight was just beginning. 2 days after Kevin and Miranda's dramatic exit, my doorbell rang at 7:30 in the morning. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in an expensive suit holding a briefcase. Behind her stood a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a law school recruitment poster. "Mrs. Williams? I'm Sarah Patterson from Patterson, Martinez and Associates. This is my colleague, James Park. We represent your son, Kevin, in some family legal matters." Family legal matters. That was one way to put it. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. "What can I do for you?" Sarah smiled with the kind of practiced warmth that probably cost $350 an hour. "Mrs. Williams, your son is concerned about your well-being. He's asked us to discuss some options that might be beneficial for everyone involved." James stepped forward, pulling out a tablet. "We understand you may have discovered some financial accounts that your late husband kept private. While we're sure he had good intentions, managing complex investments can be overwhelming, especially during the grieving process. Overwhelming. As if I hadn't spent 38 years managing credit union operations and overseeing million-dollar portfolios while Harold secretly played real estate mogul. I appreciate your concern, but I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. Sarah's smile never wavered. Of course you are. But consider this. Your son could help shoulder that burden. We've drafted some documents that would give Kevin power of attorney over your financial decisions, just temporarily, until you've had time to properly grieve. There it was. Exactly what Harold's private investigator had warned about. Temporarily, I repeated. And who determines when my grieving period is over? James exchanged a glance with Sarah. That would be at your discretion, naturally. Naturally. I stepped back toward my door. Counselors, I think we're done here. Mrs. Williams, Sarah's voice sharpened slightly. Your son is prepared to file a petition with the court regarding your mental competency. He's concerned about some erratic financial decisions you've been making. What erratic decisions? Accessing offshore accounts, conducting international financial transactions without professional guidance. To an outside observer, it might appear that you're not thinking clearly. The threat was crystal clear. Sign over power of attorney voluntarily, or they'd have me declared incompetent by force. You know what's interesting about threats? I asked, leaning against my door frame. They only work if the person you're threatening doesn't have better lawyers than you do. Sarah's professional mask slipped slightly. I beg your pardon? I said you can tell my son that his plan won't work. Harold left me more than just money. He left me protection. I closed the door in their faces and immediately called the number I'd found in Harold's hidden files. Patricia Chen, the private investigator, answered on the second ring. Miss Chen, this is Margaret Williams, Harold Williams's widow. Mrs. Me. Williams, I've been expecting your call. Harold told me you might need my services someday. He did? About 8 months ago, Harold asked me to prepare a comprehensive legal defense package in case anyone tried to challenge your competency or your right to his assets. Everything's ready to go. Harold had been 3 steps ahead, even in death. How ready? Mrs. Williams, by the time I'm done presenting evidence of your son's gambling debts, fraudulent loan applications, and attempts to manipulate elderly family members, he'll be lucky if he doesn't face criminal charges. For the first time in months, I smiled genuinely. Miss Chen, I think it's time to make some phone calls. Patricia Chen's office was in a sleek, downtown building that screamed expensive legal services. But as I sat across from her reviewing Harold's defense package, I realized my husband had been planning for this confrontation long before he died. Your husband was incredibly thorough, Patricia said, spreading documents across her mahogany desk. Bank records showing Kevin's gambling losses, audio recordings of him discussing plans to have you declared incompetent, even photographs of him meeting with estate planning lawyers. Audio recordings? Patricia nodded grimly. Harold suspected Kevin was planning something, so he had your house wired for sound last year. Completely legal since it was his own property. I thought about all the conversations Kevin and Miranda had had in my kitchen over the past 8 months. Every dismissive comment about my mental state, every calculation about Harold's assets, every cruel joke about putting me in a care facility. Harold had heard it all. There's more, Patricia continued. Harold also discovered that Miranda has been systematically isolating you from family and friends. She's been telling people you're becoming senile, that you need supervision. The pieces clicked into place. Why my sister had stopped calling regularly. Why neighbors seemed awkward when they saw me. Why my book club friends had been treating me like I was fragile. Miranda had been conducting a whisper campaign, preparing the groundwork for Kevin's legal challenge. How extensive is the evidence? Extensive enough to destroy any competency challenge and probably land them both in jail for elder abuse and attempted fraud. Patricia pulled out a thick folder. But there's something else. Harold left specific instructions about what to do if you ever needed to access the offshore account. She handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Harold's careful handwriting. Inside was a letter dated just 1 week before Harold's death. My dearest Margaret. If you're reading this, then Kevin has shown his true colors, and you've discovered the account I've been building for 40 years. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you about it while I was alive, but I needed to protect it from Kevin until the time was right. The money isn't just an inheritance, it's justice. Every penny came from investments I made using information Kevin thought he was hiding from us. When he started his real estate company, he would brag about his inside deals and guaranteed investments. What he didn't know was that I was listening and investing in the same opportunities with money he didn't know existed. Kevin unknowingly funded his own downfall. Every property he flipped, I bought 3 more in the same area. Every stock tip he mentioned, I invested in with money from our original inheritance. The offshore account exists because I used Kevin's own greed against him. Now it's your turn to use his greed against him. Patricia has instructions to make the account transfers immediately. By the time you read this letter, you'll have financial independence Kevin can never touch. But more importantly, you'll have the power to choose how this ends. You can forgive him, take care of him despite his betrayal, and hope he learns to be a better man. Or you can let him face the consequences of trying to steal from his own mother. The choice is yours, my love. It always has been. Forever yours. Harold. I set the letter down with shaking hands. Harold hadn't just protected me from Kevin, he'd orchestrated Kevin's downfall using Kevin's own schemes against him. Mrs. Williams, Patricia was watching me carefully. Are you ready to proceed? I thought about Kevin as a little boy, excited about his first day of school. Then I thought about him standing in my kitchen 2 days ago, calling me a crazy old woman while his wife threatened me. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Miss Chen, I want you to file every piece of evidence we have with the appropriate authorities, and I want you to do it today. The next morning brought chaos to my quiet Denver neighborhood. I was sipping coffee and reading the newspaper when 3 black SUVs pulled up to Kevin and Miranda's house across the street. Agents and FBI windbreakers started carrying boxes out of their front door. My phone rang immediately. Mom. Kevin's voice was panicked, desperate. What did you do? I protected myself, I said calmly, watching through my kitchen window as agents loaded computers and filing cabinets into their vehicles. What you should have done for your family instead of trying to rob them. You don't understand. This will destroy us. You destroyed yourselves. I just documented it. Miranda's voice came through the phone, shrill and angry. You vindictive old witch. We were trying to help you. By stealing my husband's watch? By planning to have me declared incompetent? By spreading lies about my mental health to isolate me from friends and family? The line went quiet except for Miranda's ragged breathing. Harold knew everything, Kevin. Every debt, every lie, every plan you made to rob us. He spent the last year of his life protecting me from his own son. Dad wouldn't. Your father hired a private investigator to document your gambling addiction and your plans to steal my inheritance. He had our house wired for sound so he could record every conversation you had about putting me in a care facility. I heard Kevin make a sound like a wounded animal. The FBI is seizing your business records because Harold's evidence shows you've been using fraudulent information to secure loans. The IRS is auditing you because you've been hiding income, and the state attorney's office is investigating you for elder abuse. Mom, please. Kevin's voice broke. I never meant for it to go this far. When did it start, Kevin? When did you decide your mother was worth more to you dead than alive? Long silence. When Kevin spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. When I realized Dad had been hiding money from us. I saw some paperwork in his office last Christmas, references to accounts I'd never heard of. I thought if you both died, everything would come to me automatically. The honesty was brutal, but somehow cleaner than the months of lies and manipulation. You were wrong. Harold made sure everything would be protected from you. How much? Kevin asked. How much did he hide? Enough to ensure I never have to depend on family who sees me as a burden. I hung up and watched through the window as FBI agents escorted Kevin and Miranda to separate cars. Miranda was screaming at the agents, probably demanding lawyers and threatening lawsuits. Kevin just looked broken. My phone rang again. This time it was my neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski. "Margaret, I just wanted to call and apologize. Miranda told me you were having memory problems and I believed her. I should have talked to you directly." "It's all right, Helen." Miranda can be very convincing. Is it true what they're saying? That Kevin was planning to steal from you? I looked at Harold's picture on my mantle, remembering the man who'd protected me even after death. It's true. But it's over now. 3 weeks later, I sat in Patricia Chen's office reviewing the final legal documents. Kevin and Miranda were facing federal fraud charges. Their business had been seized and their assets frozen pending investigation. But that morning had brought an unexpected visitor. "Mrs. Williams, there's someone here to see you," Patricia's secretary announced. "Says his name is Robert Martinez, and he has something that belongs to you." The man who entered was in his 60s, well-dressed with the kind of careful demeanor that suggested law enforcement background. In his hands was a familiar black leather box. "Mrs. Williams, I'm the one who bought your husband's watch from the pawn shop." I stared at him, confused. "How did you know to find me?" Robert smiled and set the box on Patricia's desk. "Because Harold Williams hired me 25 years ago to protect this watch if anything ever happened to him." "I don't understand." "I'm a retired federal marshal, Mrs. Umtresumfersim. Williams, your husband contracted me to monitor certain situations. When the watch appeared at Rocky Mountain Pawn, I was notified immediately." Patricia was taking notes furiously. "You had surveillance on Kevin Williams?" "Among other things." Harold was thorough in his preparations. Robert opened the leather box revealing Harold's Omega. "But there's something else you need to know about this watch." He turned it over and pressed something on the back. A second hidden compartment opened, smaller than the first. Inside was a micro SD card. "Harold recorded everything, Mrs. Williams. Every conversation Kevin had about manipulating you. Every meeting with lawyers about declaring you incompetent. Every discussion about what to do with your assets after you were gone." The room spun slightly. Harold was recording Kevin for 18 months? Audio, video, financial records? Everything needed to ensure Kevin could never successfully challenge your mental competency or your right to Harold's inheritance. Robert inserted the SD card into Patricia's computer. The screen filled with folder after folder of evidence. Audio recordings, video files, financial documents, even photographs of Kevin meeting with lawyers and loan sharks. Your husband loved you enough to spend the last 2 years of his life building an unbreakable legal defense against his own son. I thought about Harold's final months, how stressed he'd seemed, how many late evenings he'd spent in his office. He hadn't been hiding from me. He'd been protecting me. "There's one more thing," Robert said quietly. "Harold left specific instructions about what to do if Kevin ever tried to have you declared incompetent." He pulled out a sealed envelope marked Final Instructions, Margaret's Protection Plan. Inside was a document that made my breath catch. "In the event that Kevin Stevens Williams attempts legal action against Margaret Williams' mental competency, the following assets will be transferred immediately to the Denver Children's Hospital in Kevin Stevens. Williams' name, asterisk, asterisk. All property owned by Stevens Investments. LLC asterisk asterisk. All gambling debts and outstanding loans. All legal fees and court costs associated with elder abuse charges." Kevin Stevens Williams will be personally responsible for all debts and legal consequences, while receiving no benefit from any inheritance or asset transfer. Harold had arranged for Kevin to inherit his own destruction. "Your husband was a brilliant man," Patricia said admiringly. "He turned Kevin's greed into a legal trap." "Harold knew Kevin would never stop trying to get the money," Robert explained. "So he made sure that any attempt to steal from you would result in Kevin losing everything he already had." I picked up Harold's watch, feeling its familiar weight in my hands. For 41 years, I'd thought I was married to a simple accountant who worried about money and saved every penny. Instead, I'd been married to a master strategist who'd spent 2 years orchestrating the most elaborate protection plan in legal history. "Mrs. Williams," Robert said gently, "your husband asked me to give you a final message if this day ever came." He handed me one last envelope, this one unsealed. Inside, in Harold's handwriting, "Margaret, you were always stronger than you knew. I just made sure you'd have the tools to prove it. Love always. Harold." 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of the Denver Children's Hospital, watching workers install a brass plaque that read, "The Harold Williams Memorial Wing, funded by Margaret Williams." Harold's hidden fortune had been more than enough to secure my future and fund the hospital expansion he'd always dreamed about. The final irony was that Kevin's attempt to steal from me had directly resulted in the largest charitable donation in the hospital's history. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Chen. "Kevin's sentencing hearing is next week. They're recommending 3 years federal prison plus full restitution. Miranda took a plea deal for 2 years. Still want to attend?" I typed back, "No. I have better things to do," and I did. At 75, I was finally living the life Harold had protected for me. I'd bought a small condo near the mountains, joined 2 book clubs and a hiking group, and started volunteering at the hospital twice a week. For the first time in decades, I was making decisions based on what I wanted, not what my family expected. My doorbell rang as I was preparing dinner. Through the peephole, I saw a young woman with Kevin's eyes and nervous smile. "Grandma Margaret? It's Jessica, Kevin's daughter." I hadn't seen her since Harold's funeral, when she was finishing graduate school and starting her career. Miranda had made sure to cut me off from the grandchildren along with everyone else. I opened the door. "Jessica, what a surprise." "I know I should have called first." She was twisting her hands nervously. "I heard about Dad and Miranda, about what they did to you." I wanted to apologize. "You have nothing to apologize for." "I do, though." I knew something was wrong. Dad kept asking weird questions about Grandpa Harold's finances, and Miranda was always making comments about your memory. I should have said something. I studied my granddaughter's face, seeing Harold's honesty there, along with Kevin's features. "Come in, sweetheart, let's talk." Over dinner, Jessica told me about her new job as a pediatric nurse, her engagement to a young teacher, and her guilt about her father's crimes. "I keep thinking I should visit him in prison," she said, "but I'm so angry about what he did to you. Anger is normal, but Kevin is still your father. How can you not hate him?" I thought about Harold's letter, about the choice he'd given me between forgiveness and justice. Because hate would mean he still had power over me, I choose peace instead. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "I missed you so much. Miranda told everyone you were getting confused, that you didn't want to see us anymore." "I never stopped wanting to see you, and I never will." As Jessica helped me clear the dishes, she paused at Harold's photo on the mantel. "I always wondered why Grandpa Harold wore that watch every single day. He must have really loved it." I smiled, thinking about the 2 hidden compartments, the offshore account, the elaborate protection plan that had saved my life. He loved what it protected. That night, after Jessica left with promises to visit every week, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset over the Rocky Mountains. Harold's watch was on my wrist, keeping perfect time. He'd been gone 14 months, but somehow he was still taking care of me. The greatest love stories aren't about passion or romance. They're about protection, about someone loving you enough to fight battles you don't even know you're facing. Harold had spent 2 years preparing for a war I never saw coming, ensuring that his death wouldn't leave me defenseless against his own son's greed. Some people spend their whole lives looking for that kind of love. I was lucky enough to wear it on my wrist for 41 years. Harold had given me more than financial security. He'd given me the truth about who I could trust, the strength to stand up for myself, and the freedom to choose my own future. In protecting me from Kevin's betrayal, he'd also freed me from the burden of false family loyalty. As I wound the watch that evening, performing the ritual Harold had taught me decades ago, I realized that some secrets are worth keeping. Not to deceive, but to protect. Harold's hidden fortune hadn't been about deception. It had been about love in its most practical, fierce form. The watch ticked steadily against my wrist, a reminder that even in death, true love continues to protect, to provide, and to prepare us for whatever battles we might face. And somewhere in the mountains beyond Denver, I could almost hear Harold's voice on the wind, telling me what he'd told me every morning for 41 years. Time to start another day, sweetheart. And remember, you're stronger than you know. Thank you for listening to this entire story. If you enjoyed Margaret's journey of discovery, betrayal, and ultimate triumph, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our compelling stories. Your support means everything to us, and we have many more incredible tales to share with you. Until next time, remember that sometimes the greatest protection comes from those who love us most, even when we don't realize it.